Brothers and sisters, can I ask you something today? Have you ever been there? You know what I'm talking about. That place where you feel like you just can't hold on anymore. That moment when every door seems to slam shut in your face. When your prayers feel like they're bouncing off the ceiling. When you're gasping for air but can't seem to catch your breath. Have you been to that place where life feels like it's hit absolute rock bottom? Let me tell you something. We all want to go up, don't we? We want to climb that ladder of success. We want comfort, security, stability. We want our lives to look good on Instagram, to make our parents proud, to have something to show for all our hard work. But here's what I've learned after years of walking with the Lord and watching His work in people's lives. God sometimes takes us on a journey we never signed up for. He leads us down paths we don't understand. Down and down and down we go, until we find ourselves at the very bottom, wondering how on earth we got there. And in that moment, in that moment, we cry out, don't we? God, why? Why are you allowing this? Why have you brought me so low? Why is everything I've built crumbling around me? We question, we doubt, we wonder if God has forgotten us. But listen to what Scripture tells us in James 4:6. God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. Did you catch that? When we're at the bottom, when we're in that place of humility, sometimes forced humility, if we're honest, that's not just a place of failure. That's the place where grace begins to flow. Think about Joseph for a moment. His brothers threw him into a pit, literally rock bottom. Then he was sold into slavery. Then he was falsely accused and thrown into prison. Talk about going from bad to worse to absolute worst. But you know what? That pit, that prison, that place of complete powerlessness, that was God's grace school. That was where God was preparing Joseph for a purpose bigger than he could have ever imagined. Or think about David. The man who was anointed to be king spent years hiding in caves, running for his life from a jealous king who wanted him dead. In those dark caves, with nothing but the sound of dripping water and his own fearful breathing, David encountered the presence of God in ways he never could have in a palace. And Peter, oh Peter, he denied Jesus 3 times. 3 times. Can you imagine the shame, the guilt, the absolute devastation of knowing you betrayed the one person you loved most? But it was in that moment of complete failure, in those bitter tears of regret, that Peter truly understood the depth of God's grace. Here's what I want you to hear today. When we're at our lowest point, when we've lost everything we thought defined us, when we're stripped of all our pride and pretense, that's when God draws closest. When the crowds disappear, when our accomplishments mean nothing, when we have nothing left to boast about, that's when we finally see grace clearly. God says to us what He said to Paul, "My grace is sufficient for you." That place that looks like the end, that's actually where grace is just getting started. Beloved, The bottom is not the end of your story. Rock bottom is God's special stage where He's preparing to demonstrate His grace in the most powerful, most profound, most unforgettable way. It's the place where He sets up His greatest work in your life. 1. At the bottom, you finally realize your limitations. Let me be real with you for a minute. Going to the bottom isn't just about having a bad day or facing some difficulties. I'm talking about that place where you have absolutely nothing left to hold on to. No strength, no backup plan, no person who can rescue you, no way out that you can see. You might still be showing up to work with a smile on your face, still posting on social media, still going through the motions, but inside, you're completely empty. You've got nothing left. That's rock bottom. And here's what's interesting about human nature. We think pretty highly of ourselves, don't we? I mean, look at what we've accomplished. We've got our education, our experience, our skills, our connections, our savings account. We've climbed the corporate ladder, or built our business, or raised our family. We've even been faithful in church, serving on committees, tithing regularly. And somewhere along the way, we start to believe the lie that we're maintaining all of this through our own strength. But when you hit the bottom, and I mean really hit it, all of that comes crashing down. And suddenly you realize just how fragile it all was, how quickly everything you built can turn to dust, how powerless you really are. James 4:10 tells us, "Humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will lift you up." You see, we can't see grace when we're standing tall on our own accomplishments. We can only see it when we're brought low. Job understood this. This man lost everything: his wealth, his children, his health. Everything that defined his life was stripped away. And you know what he said? In Job 42:5, he makes this incredible confession. "My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you." Think about that. Job had been a righteous man his whole life. He knew about God. He talked about God. He worshiped God. But it wasn't until he lost everything that he truly saw God. The Israelites experienced the same thing in the wilderness. They were lost, wandering in a desert with no food, no water, no direction. Every day was a crisis. Every day they faced the reality of their complete dependence. And every single day, God sent manna from heaven. They learned something in that barren place that they never learned in Egypt or could have learned in the Promised Land before they were ready. God is the one who provides. Not their jobs, not their skills, not their strategic planning. God. When you're at the bottom, you can't help but admit the truth. I can't do this. I'm not enough. I'm weak. I'm broken. I need help. Now, the world will tell you that kind of confession makes you a loser. That's the language of failure, right? But in God's economy, that confession is the beginning of something beautiful. That's the language of faith. That's the starting line of a new race. You see, God doesn't pour His grace into vessels that are already full of themselves. He fills the empty ones, He strengthens the weak ones. He lifts up the broken ones. When we finally stop trying to be our own Savior and admit that we desperately need Him, that's when grace rushes in like a flood. The bottom is also where we learn compassion. When you've been broken, you can sit with other broken people without judgment. When you've been desperate, you understand desperation. When you've cried those kinds of tears, you know how to comfort others who are crying. Rock bottom becomes a school of empathy, a classroom where God teaches us His heart for the hurting. So when everything falls apart and you find yourself at the bottom, don't miss the lesson. God is teaching you to let go of your white-knuckle grip on control and to trust Him completely. This is where faith becomes real. This is where religion becomes relationship. This is where we stop trying to impress God with our strength and start receiving His strength in our weakness. 2. When everything collapses, you see only God. There's something that happens when everything you've built comes crashing down. It's terrifying, honestly. When what you spent years constructing disappears overnight, the sense of loss is overwhelming. You feel this emptiness, this fear, this "what now?" that keeps you up at night. But here's the paradox. Here's the mystery. In that very moment when everything else disappears, suddenly God becomes crystal clear. When all the things you were depending on vanish one by one, what remains standing is God. Only God. David knew this experience intimately. Can you imagine? He was anointed as king. The prophet Samuel poured oil on his head in front of everyone. God had chosen him to lead Israel, but instead of sitting on a throne, he was running for his life, hiding in caves, living like a fugitive. And in Psalm 56:9, in the middle of all that chaos, David writes, "When I cry out to you, then my enemies will turn back. This I know, because God is for me." Everything had collapsed around him, but in that collapse, David discovered something precious. God was his true refuge, not the crown, not the palace, not the army, not his popularity, just God. Peter's story hits me every time I read it. Here's a man who swore he would die for Jesus. "Even if everyone else abandons you, I never will," he declared. But then, when the moment came, when the pressure was on, he denied Jesus 3 times. And the gospel tells us he went out and wept bitterly. Can you feel that? The crushing weight of his own failure? The devastation of realizing he wasn't as strong as he thought. But that breakdown, that moment of absolute collapse, that's when Peter truly understood grace. Not when he was feeling confident and strong, but when he was broken and weak. The collapse wasn't the end of Peter's story. It was the beginning of his real ministry. It was in his weakness that he discovered the power of God's grace. Here's what I've learned over the years. We spend our whole lives building these support systems. Our career, our reputation, our relationships, our savings, our plans. We lean on these things. We draw our security from them. We think, as long as I have these pillars in place, I'll be okay. But sometimes, and I'm convinced it's out of love, God allows those pillars to fall. Not because He wants to hurt us, but because He wants to show us they were never meant to be our foundation in the first place. They were always too weak, too temporary, too unreliable. There's only one rock that never shakes, only one foundation that never cracks, only one source that never runs dry, and that's God Himself. Lamentations 3:22-23 has carried me through some dark times. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Think about the context of Lamentations. The city is destroyed. The temple is in ruins. Everything is lost. And yet, in the middle of that devastation, the writer proclaims, God's mercy hasn't ceased. His love hasn't stopped. His faithfulness is still great. The collapse doesn't mean God has left. Actually, it's often in the rubble that we see God most clearly. When all the distractions are gone, when all the noise is silenced, when all the competing voices fade away, there's God, standing in the ruins with us, ready to build something new. I love how God works. He doesn't just fix what's broken. He doesn't just patch up what fell apart. No, He takes the rubble and builds something completely new. Something better. Something that glorifies Him more. Just like Nehemiah rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem, God rebuilds our lives. Just like the temple was reconstructed, God reconstructs our hearts. And the new building is always stronger, always more beautiful, always more anchored in His grace than what was there before. So when everything collapses, and maybe you're in that place right now, don't assume God has disappeared. He hasn't. He's right there in the middle of it all, more present than ever, waiting for you to see Him. When the props are removed, when the masks fall off, when the pretense is stripped away, what's left is the one thing that matters most: God's unchanging, unfailing, relentless love for you. 3. Through humility, the foundation of grace is laid. Let me tell you what humility really means. It's not about thinking less of yourself. It's about thinking of yourself less. It's about taking yourself off the throne of your own heart and inviting God to sit there instead. And let me be honest with you, most of us don't choose humility. We're forced into it when we hit the bottom. But it's in that forced humbling that God lays the foundation for His grace to flow in our lives. Remember when Jesus washed the disciples' feet? Can you picture it? The King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the Creator of the universe, on His knees with a towel, washing dirty feet. And He says in John 13:14-15, "If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do just as I have done to you." This wasn't just about cleanliness or hospitality. Jesus was demonstrating something profound. Humility is the channel through which grace flows. When we're willing to go low, to serve, to put others first, that's when grace can move through us to touch other people's lives. Look at Joseph again. I keep coming back to Joseph because his story just amazes me. This young man had dreams, literal dreams from God, showing him that he would be great, that people would bow down to him. But the path to that destiny led through a pit, through slavery, through false accusations, through prison. Years and years in the bottom of life. But Joseph never complained. He never shook his fist at God. He never became bitter. Instead, he humbly served wherever he was, in Potiphar's house, in the prison, eventually in Pharaoh's palace. And in that humility, in that willingness to be faithful in the low places, God was shaping his character. God was preparing him for a responsibility that required humility. Because here's the truth: God can't trust proud people with great responsibility. Pride corrupts power, but humility stewards power well. When Joseph finally stood before his brothers, the ones who had thrown him in that pit years earlier, he could have destroyed them. He had the power. He had the right. But instead, he said in Genesis 50:20, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." That's the fruit of humility. That's what happens when someone has been through the bottom and learned grace there. God pours out his grace on humble people because humble people know they need it. Proud people think grace is nice but optional. They believe they can make it on their own. But humble people know that without grace, they can't make it through a single day. They know every breath is a gift. Every opportunity is mercy. Every good thing is undeserved favor. The prophet Jeremiah gives us this beautiful picture in chapter 18. God tells him to go watch a potter at work. And Jeremiah watches as the potter shapes the clay, but the pot gets marred. So what does the potter do? He doesn't throw it away. He presses it back down, humbles it back to a formless lump, and then reshapes it into something even better. That's what God does with us. When we're at the bottom, pressed down, seemingly formless and purposeless, we're actually on the wheel. We're in the potter's hands, and he's reshaping us into something more beautiful than what we were before. But we have to stay soft. We have to remain humble. We have to trust his hands. Jesus said it plainly in Matthew 23:12. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. Humility is the doorway to grace. It's not weakness. It's actually the prerequisite for true strength. Because God's power is made perfect in weakness, right? When we're weak and we know it, that's when his strength shows up in ways that amaze everyone, including us. So when life pushes you down to the bottom, don't fight the humbling. I know it hurts. I know it's uncomfortable. I know our pride screams against it, but that low place, that humble position, that's where the foundation of grace is being poured. That's the soil where God's best work in your life is about to take root and grow. 4. The rejected place is actually where God uses you most. Let me tell you something the world doesn't understand. What looks like rejection to people often looks like selection to God. When the world pushes you aside, when doors slam in your face, when people write you off as a failure, God is often setting you apart for something special. What appears to be a place of rejection is actually a place of divine preparation. Think about Moses. This guy had everything going for him, right? Raised in Pharaoh's palace, educated in all the wisdom of Egypt, positioned for greatness. But then he made a mistake, killed an Egyptian, and had to flee for his life. He spent the next 40 years as a nobody, a shepherd in the middle of nowhere, watching someone else's sheep in the desert. 40 years. Can you imagine? For 40 years, Moses was forgotten by everyone who once knew him. As far as the world was concerned, he was washed up, finished, irrelevant. But God wasn't finished with Moses. That desert, that seemingly wasted time, that place where he was hidden away and rejected, that was actually God's training ground. God was preparing Moses for the greatest mission of his life, delivering his people from slavery. The rejected place became the place of preparation. David experienced the same thing. After Samuel anointed him king, you'd think the path would be straightforward, right? But no, Saul tried to kill him repeatedly. David spent years living in caves, hiding out in enemy territory, rejected by the very nation he was called to lead. People who should have supported him abandoned him. He was hunted like an animal. But here's what's amazing. It was during those years of rejection that David wrote many of the Psalms. Those songs of worship, those cries for help, those declarations of faith that have comforted millions of people for thousands of years. They came from the rejected place. The cave became a sanctuary. The wilderness became a worship space. Rejection became the soil for some of the most beautiful expressions of faith ever written. And then there's Jesus, the ultimate example. Isaiah 53:3 prophesied it. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain. The religious leaders rejected him. The political leaders rejected him. Even his own people shouted, "Crucify him!" They nailed him to a cross, the most shameful, rejected way to die in that culture. But that place of ultimate rejection, the cross, became the place of ultimate redemption. The most rejected moment in history became the most significant event in human history. What looked like total defeat was actually total victory. What seemed like the end was actually the beginning of everything. Here's what I need you to understand. When people reject you, it doesn't mean God has rejected you. Actually, it might mean the opposite. God often uses rejection to separate us from the crowd. to set us apart, to prepare us for something that requires us to be different. 2 Corinthians 4:8-9 puts it this way: "We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed." Notice that? Even in the most rejected places, even when it feels like everything is against us, we're not abandoned. God is there. God is with us. God is working. Sometimes rejection is God's protection. He's keeping you from something that would have harmed you, even though it looked good at the time. Sometimes rejection is God's redirection. He's closing one door because He wants to open a better door. And sometimes rejection is God's preparation. He's allowing you to be set aside for a season because He's preparing you for something bigger. So if you're in a rejected place right now, if you feel like you're on the shelf, if you feel like you're not being used, if you feel like everyone has moved on without you, don't despair. You're not forgotten. You're not useless. You're not finished. You might be in the rejected place, but in God's hands, that's often the exact place where He does His best work. That's where He shapes you, molds you, and prepares you for the assignment that's coming. The rejected place is actually the selected place. Trust God's process. Trust His timing. What looks like rejection today might be the greatest blessing of your life when you look back on it tomorrow. 5. The bottom isn't the end. It's the beginning of grace. I want to end by talking about what the bottom really means. So many people think rock bottom is the end of the story. Game over. Life is finished. Dreams are dead. Hope is gone. But that's not how God works. In God's economy, the bottom isn't where things end. It's where things begin. The bottom isn't the period at the end of the sentence. It's the comma before something new starts. Remember the Israelites at the Red Sea? They're trapped. Egyptian army behind them, massive body of water in front of them, mountains on both sides. Humanly speaking, they're done. This is it. There's no way out. Can you imagine the panic, the fear, the absolute certainty that this is how their story ends? But that's exactly when God showed up. Right there at the dead end, at the impossible situation, at what looked like the bottom, God parted the waters. He made a highway through the sea. What looked like the end became the pathway to freedom. The bottom became the launching pad for a miracle. The resurrection of Jesus is the ultimate example of this principle. The cross looked like the end. The disciples thought it was over. When Jesus died, their hope died with Him. They went back to their old lives, back to fishing, defeated and disappointed. The bottom of their faith, the death of their dreams. But Sunday morning changed everything. The bottom wasn't the end. It was just the setup for the greatest comeback in history. Death wasn't the final word. The resurrection proved that with God, nothing is ever truly finished. The darkest moment became the brightest dawn. The greatest defeat became the greatest victory. Hannah's story moves me every time I read it. She was barren, ridiculed, heartbroken. She wept so intensely in the temple that the priest thought she was drunk. She was at her absolute bottom, but her tears, her brokenness, her desperate prayer, that became the beginning of something remarkable. God gave her Samuel, who became one of the greatest prophets and leaders in Israel's history. Her bottom became the birthplace of blessing, not just for her, but for an entire nation. I've seen this pattern over and over again in ministry. I've watched people hit the bottom, lost their job, lost their marriage, lost their health, lost their hope. And in that moment, it looked like everything was over. But then, somewhere in that darkness, they cried out to God, really cried out. Not religious prayers, but desperate, honest, God, I need you prayers. And you know what happened? God met them there, right there in the pit, right there in the mess, right there at the bottom. And what came next was always better than what came before. Not necessarily easier, but deeper, more authentic, more powerful, because now they knew God not as a concept or a theology, but as their personal Savior, their present help, their very real hope. Lamentations 3:29 says, "Let him sit alone in silence when it is laid on him. Let him put his mouth in the dust. There may yet be hope." Did you catch that? Even when you're sitting in the dust, even when you're at the absolute bottom, there may yet be hope, even there, especially there. Because here's the secret. When you're at the bottom, when you're in the darkest valley, when you can't see any light, that's when you hear God's voice most clearly. When everything is quiet, when all the distractions are gone, when you have nothing but God, that's when His whisper becomes thunderous. That's when His presence becomes undeniable. Think about stars. You can't see them very well during the day, can you? Too much light pollution, too much brightness from the sun. But at night, in the darkness, the stars shine brilliantly. In the same way, God's grace shines brightest in our darkest moments. His light is most visible against the backdrop of our darkness. His power is most evident in our powerlessness. So the bottom, that place you fear, that place you're trying so hard to avoid or escape, isn't actually a place of ending. It's a place of beginning. It's where God writes a new chapter. It's where He starts a new work. It's where He displays His glory in ways you never could have imagined. Your weakness becomes the stage for His strength. Your failure becomes the canvas for His grace. Your emptiness becomes the space He fills with His presence. Your ending becomes His beginning. I know some of you are at the bottom right now. Maybe you've been there for a while. Maybe you just arrived there recently, and it feels hopeless. It feels like nothing will ever change. But I'm here to tell you, this isn't the end. This is the setup. This is God positioning you for something you can't see yet. This is the low place before the high place. This is the valley before the mountaintop. This is the Friday before the Sunday resurrection. Don't give up at the bottom. That's where grace begins. That's where miracles are born. That's where God does his best work. The bottom is not your destination. It's just the starting line of the next leg of your journey. Conclusion. The bottom is a new door of hope. Let me bring this home for you today. When everything you are holding on to with all your strength falls away, when your grip finally loosens and you let go, that's when God fills the empty space with his grace. The bottom isn't a symbol of defeat. It's a doorway to hope. It's a gateway to something new. It's a threshold you have to cross to get to where God wants to take you. God doesn't waste anything in your life. Not your failures, not your tears, not your wounds, not your broken pieces. He takes all of it, every single bit, and he uses it. He shapes it. He transforms it. He makes something beautiful out of your brokenness. He creates a masterpiece from your mess. So please, don't be afraid of the bottom. I know it's scary. I know it hurts. I know it feels like you're falling with nothing to catch you. But God is there. He's already there, waiting for you. The bottom might humble you, but God uses that humility to build something incredible. He takes your low place and makes it the foundation for something higher than you ever dreamed possible. God is going to rebuild your life. I believe that. I've seen it too many times to doubt it. He's going to take the rubble and create something new. He's going to take your story of failure and rewrite it as a story of grace. He's going to take your testimony of hitting bottom and turn it into a message of hope that encourages countless others who feel like they're falling. Because here's the beautiful truth. Grace is always clearest at the bottom. That's where it shines brightest. That's where it means the most. That's where it changes everything. And God, our good, loving, faithful God, he will absolutely transform your bottom into a launching pad. Your pit will become your platform. Your prison will become your pulpit. Your rejection will become your resurrection. The bottom is not the end of your story. It's just the beginning of your greatest chapter yet. It's where grace starts. It's where hope is born. It's where God shows up in power. And when he lifts you up from that place, and he will lift you up, you'll look back and see it clearly. The bottom was never the end. It was always a new beginning. It was always where grace began. So hold on. Keep believing. Trust the process. God is not finished with you. Your story isn't over. The best is yet to come. And it all starts here, at the bottom, where grace begins.
If this message has encouraged your heart, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so others can hear it too.